Now, caution, concern, and now condemnation. 3 C's. That's how India's policy on Ukraine has evolved. When the war was brewing, it was caution. When the war broke out, it was concern. And now, as war crimes emerge, it is condemnation. Let's begin with what happened on Tuesday. The United Nations Security Council was convened again. Just one thing was on the agenda: the brutal killings in Bucha. Once again, there was no consensus. The West accused Russia of a massacre, of killing civilians. Russia called the entire thing staged. Then it was India's turn to speak. Ambassador Tirumurti condemned the massacre in Bucha. He called for an independent investigation, but he stopped short of naming Russia. Listen to this.
Recent reports of civilian killings in Bucha are deeply disturbing. We unequivocally condemn these killings and support the call for an independent investigation.
The rest of it was as expected. Talks, humanitarian assistance, and upholding the UN Charter. These have been India's consistent demands. But let's focus on the condemnation. Yes, India did not name Russia, but the message was quite clear. Neutrality is not a free pass for war crimes. And by the way, this was India's strongest statement on Ukraine yet. Not concern or caution. This was condemnation. So do we see this as a strategic rethink by India? Well, not really. Foreign Minister Jaishankar spoke in Parliament today, and he once again spelled out India's position. He said if India has picked any side, it is the side of peace.
In this day and age, dialogue and diplomacy are the right answers to any disputes. And this should bear in mind that the contemporary global order has been built on the UN Charter, on respect for international law, and for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. If India has chosen a side, it is the side of peace, and it is for an immediate end to violence.
It was a long address by the foreign minister, almost an hour long, but it basically boiled down to 2 things. Number 1, protecting India's national interest, and number 2, playing a positive role during the war. And positive role doesn't just mean neutrality, it also means humanitarian support. It means plugging supply shortages. Minister Jaishankar did speak out about this. He says India will step up export of essential items.
We will also step forward where global demands for food, grains, and other materials are concerned. And we will do it without, in a manner that is helpful to the global economy, which will not take undue advantage of countries in distress.
Washington would have seen all of this, the condemnation, the evolution of India's position, all of it. The question is, how do they perceive it? As India joining their camp, or is India standing up against war crimes? How do they see it? Until now, their strategy has been quite confusing, frankly. Last week, we had a US official threatening India. Hours later, the State Department had to step in. On Tuesday, there was more confusion from Washington, D.C., courtesy Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin. He was asked about India's military cooperation with Russia. You should listen to Austin's response.
Well, we continue to work with them to ensure that they understand that, it's not in their best, we believe that it's not in their best interest to continue to invest in Russian equipment. And our requirement going forward is that, they downscale the types of equipment that they're investing in and look to invest more in the types of things that will make us continue to be compatible.
3 problems here. Number 1, India decides India's best interests. It is not for the Pentagon to believe or assess what is good for India. Number 2, did you hear the part of Austin's statement? Our requirement going forward is that India downscale the types of equipment they're investing in. Again, the same attitude. How can India's defense purchases be based on America's quote-unquote requirement? And number 3, there is no admission of historic responsibility. For instance, why does India buy Russian weapons at all? Why is India's arsenal filled with Soviet inventory? The answer lies in America's hostile attitude during the Cold War. Nobody in Washington is willing to talk about that. All of these issues will come to the fore on the 11th of April. That's next Monday. That's when India and America will hold their 2+2 dialogue. We've talked about this format before. 2 plus 2 basically means 2 ministers from the United States and 2 ministers from India. 2 plus 2. They meet. In this format, it is the foreign and defense ministers. The last round was held in New Delhi, so this time S. Jaishankar, the foreign minister of India, and Rajnath Singh, the defense minister of India, are flying to Washington, D.C. And ahead of this meeting, Jaishankar spoke to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. This was their second phone call in 7 days. Naturally, the focus was on Ukraine. Both sides agreed to remain closely coordinated on the war. And this phone call is a precursor to the 2 plus 2. Not necessarily a good precursor, because both sides have very different demands. America will look to test India's commitment, possibly push for public criticism of Russia's war. India, meanwhile, has more pressing priorities. China, for instance, the Indo-Pacific, Afghanistan. These issues will be more important for India. In simple words, America will want to discuss more of Russia, and India will want to keep Russia to the minimum. It promises to be a tricky summit next week. The joint statement will be the one to watch out for. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.